Today is Tuesday, March 14th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your host for the day, Mike Shalau from Is Was Brewing. Chris is in California, working on some beers, driving up and down the coast, and complaining how he can't get any fatheads. We got a fun podcast today of an old school roundtable, but first, I'd like to thank all of the listeners on WLPN. Thanks for tuning in, and everyone who downloaded or streamed the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to you too. Yeah, great fade by Serge as usual. He actually literally cued me by touching me, which I like that. That was nice. We've got a great lineup, and I think instead of just talking for 15 minutes before we introduce anyone like Chris and I usually do, we'll introduce people. He has seniority in his head, so I don't have that the same way. So I'm going to go from right to left the way I'm looking at you. And we'll start with Michael Roper of the Hopleaf. Michael, how are you?
Good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
What anything new since the last time I saw you about 5 days ago?
Not too much. I mean, we're doing a little event tomorrow night to introduce the first IPA brewed by Allagash.
Wow,
Which
that's exciting.
I haven't tried it yet. I have no idea. But I kind of trust Rob. He's probably given this a lot of thought because I think for the last 20 years he's been saying I'm never going to brew an IPA.
It comes for all of us, I guess.
So I guess the tide changed and he's going to do it. So I'm kind of curious. It might be fun.
Yeah, I trust them too. I trust them to make something that I would probably like in the IPA world. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. Have you had any beers recently? Or I guess beers that you're looking forward to have, which could be that one. But
well, when I read that, I was thinking, actually, I'm kind of looking forward to, in a sad way, to drinking as much of several beers that are vanishing. I just learned that the Ingersoll Trappist beer from Austria is no longer going to be available in the United States.
oh boy.
And we have 4 bottles of the Benno and 8 bottles of the Gregorius left. So I'm going to do my best to say goodbye because I doubt they'll come back, and I don't even know what the health of that place is. Omegang Solera, which has been a monster hit for us. The first hit that Omegang ever had for us, they decided to stop making it.
Nice.
So we have 6 barrels of that left, and the way it sells, that's not going to last very long. So yeah, I'm going to make sure that I drink my fill of these beers. We lost Trappist Ockel recently. Spencer Trappist went away. You'd think with God on their side, you'd think that they would fare better, but
God didn't say make it hazy.
yeah. So I'm trying to create a taste memory of these beers as they move into the Netherlands. But other than that, there's always good new stuff around. I'm really enjoying the Ridgeway I'm drinking right now.
Nice.
I was saying before the broadcast that the finding good British beer on tap is becoming kind of a rarity. So seeing this, it's in really good condition, and it's a real IPA. It's like not burning my tongue off. Easy drinking, not terribly alcoholic, and delicious.
Just as British beer should be, right?
Yes.
Now, you've been privy to probably more comings and goings of breweries and brands than anyone I know, probably, or at least as tuned in as anyone. Has there been one specific one that you remember that was the one you lamented the most?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
In the early days, Chicago was sort of the death. It was like the Death Star of craft brewing. But there were some really good breweries here early on that had some good ideas, and just they weren't very good business people. Chicago Brewing Company, which had Big Shoulders Porter, was their, the headliner. It was very good. It was a very good brewery. Didn't have the greatest equipment. It wasn't always great, but the recipes were good. When it was good, it was very good. We loved Golden Prairie. Mm-hmm. Which tried to make a comeback and didn't. Ted Furman tried to revive it, didn't really make it. But in its first run, he was way ahead of his time, the stuff he was brewing. It was really, really good.
Hazy IPAs?
No, but he did this buckwheat ale that was really very interesting, really, really good. And I was sad to see them go. The early days of craft brewing, a lot of breweries came and went, and now we're sort of seeing this happening again, where a lot of it isn't viable for all of them to survive. Right. I am surprised that some of the I know why Trappist Ockel went away, because there were no monks left, but it was the Spencer Trappist was a living monastery with a lot of monks. They built this beautiful brew house, and just it attracted nobody. Yeah. No one drank that beer.
My parents actually don't live far from there, and they went there, but they're not big beer drinkers. They were just on a day trip. They live in Connecticut. That's one in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, Spencer, Massachusetts.
They went there. They've been to the Von Trapp brewery too. They've neither one is a big beer drinker, but they've been to a lot of breweries for just the little day trips. And that one, my jokes aside, they did start making non-traditionally tasting Trappist beers, right? They were making IPA and things as well.
Yeah, they were trying to make things for the American market because they're in America. But, I think that their timing was terrible. If they had begun 10 years earlier, they probably would have established themselves. But, they entered a market that was extremely crowded. And I have to say that the monks are not the greatest business people. They have other priorities.
You typically don't become a monk to the money.
Right.
Almost definitionally.
Yeah, they don't get it. And that's unfortunate. In the early days, I had like a neon in my window for a brewery called New Amsterdam, which was probably one of the first New York craft breweries. I'm talking 1992, 93. And, this was a brewery that vanished without a trace. There were so many at that time that, there were these kind of visionary brewers that were terrible business people. And also the market was so small at that point, people say, why would I pay $3 more for a 6-pack of this, when Bud Light's on sale, Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of them went away. It was tough then. And now it's a different story. It's the opposite. It's so crowded. The market is very developed, but it's also much more educated. And you have to do something really remarkable to attract any attention these days. Nowadays when breweries go under, I'm less surprised than I was maybe in the old days when I thought there's so few craft breweries. What happened?
Yeah, and how many digits of pi do you think you could recite from memory?
None.
None? All right, 0 is the first. Well, thank you for that. Next up, you know him, you love him, your favorite Hopewell, top 2 Hopewell guests on the show, Jonathan. Fritz,
Hey,
how you doing?
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. What's new with you?
So I've had a pretty exciting beer year, visiting a lot of different spots, starting with Texas. I spent a week down in Austin, in the trailing 12 months. It was in November, but had some
We'll count it.
completely
It's not a math podcast.
Pilsners. Well, we'll see how I do on pie.
Yeah,
I'm gunning for the top on the pie question. But
Serge says he can do all of the digits of pi.
you told that joke already, and it was like even funnier this time than me.
Thank you.
But I spent a week down in Austin. Just had my mind completely blown by Live Oak.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had a Pils anywhere near that made in the U.S. So that was really, really fun. And then recently, just spent a couple days up in Minnesota with Fair State.
Nice.
We're doing a little collab for their entrance into the Chicago market with Oath Distribution.
Cool.
Or distributing. I don't remember the name.
We get it.
But they're entering Chicago, I think, this week. And we made a rice lager. We both really like making lagers and pilsners. So excited to taste that beer. It was fun to check out their brewery. And, collabs are less about shoveling the grain together and more about like learning, oh, what do you like? Do you hate this decal? Because we're thinking about buying a decal and all of that extra just time that you can spend at another person's brewery and then in a bar and then in another bar with the brewers is valuable beyond just being fun. So
Yeah, I was joking with someone I was hanging out with on Saturday at this release of a collaboration we did that if you spend enough time with another brewer doing a collaboration, it always ends up you talk about all the OSHA violations, the worst OSHA violations you've committed.
yeah, we certainly talked about mistakes we've made
Yeah.
in the past 7 years of being open.
Right. That's not for the podcast necessarily, but it's like every time we do a collab that lasts longer than 6 hours, at some point you're like, yeah, one time I was on top of this tank, and then goes from there.
I'm
Yes.
looking forward to the collab because we've been, they were, Fair State was doing a little bit of reconnoitering of the market as a self-distro, and we've had really good luck with them and really like them. They're nice people. The beer's really good.
Their beer, in my experience, has been something that no matter what is on tap, I'll order it because it's always good. I feel like what they are doing in Minneapolis is what I hope people think of Hopewell in Chicago, where everything's bright, clean, inviting, repeatable beers. They beat us on names. Their names are absolutely incredible. Big Doinks was one of my favorites, or Crankin' Foamers is their light lager.
Oh, nice.
Just excellent names
That is a
across the
great name.
board to match excellent beers. And then in Chicago, we just turned 7 years old at
Congratulations.
Hopewell.
Yay.
So we celebrate it in March, even though it happened in February, because we want people to show up. And we're completely changing our market strategy in Chicago. So, it's not one of those sexy beer things that I'd talk about if it wasn't the insiders roundtable.
Sure.
People might actually care listening to this that we have been self-distributing for 7 years.
And quite a bit of beer too.
In the
Very effective.
yeah, we're really proud of what we were able to build. And then as of this week, we're signed with Lakeshore, which is one of the big distributors in the Chicagoland area, and they'll be covering 95% of what we distribute in Illinois. And then still continuing to self-distribute some of the further out spots while we figure out what we want to do there.
Sure.
But really big business change for us. We're really excited about it. We think it gives us some opportunity to grow to spots that, the 2 vans that we have running weren't really getting to
Sure.
as efficiently.
And what was the biggest deciding factor to go with Lakeshore as opposed to some of the other distributors in?
Honestly, we talked to everybody. Like you said, we're proud of what we were able to build self-distro. We were, on the bigger side of self-distributing breweries in Chicago, which, after 7 years, it makes sense. So we were able to get meetings with everybody and meeting everybody's team, seeing their plans for how they think we can grow, seeing how their teams are organized. It was really our first choice of all the distributors, and also to switch from self-distribution to working with a third-party distributor. The math has to make sense that you're growing. And so there's a lot of really great small distributors that I would definitely recommend to anybody who was coming in, cold from out of market, who could do a really good job, selling beer and growing a brand. We needed to be planning on going with a distributor that we thought could grow our already higher base of sales, because the math changes when you're when the distributor's making part of the margin, and we're spending less on distribution, but it's moving target on margin.
Right.
You gotta get a lot more volume.
Yeah, exactly. So we just ordered tanks today.
Nice.
That are fitting into, I don't know which one of you have been to our brewery before, but
I have.
It is going to, yeah, of course we did the collab. We're fitting 4 more tanks in that space. I got one used from a brewery that closed in Colorado, and then 3 we're buying new because we have very specific height restrictions.
Right. Yeah, it's not a huge space back there.
No.
But
it is
bringing
over
on
a basement.
Right.
So my brother, who's our structural engineer, every time we add a tank, he says, "Just text me when it's full. I want to know that it's still standing."
Well, at Pipeworks, we would just throw a Tiger Jack under when the floor started sinking at the original location. So you have a better strategy than we did.
Yeah. Well.
That's great. And now that you can send that stuff to a distributor warehouse, you probably can use some of that space for the tank farm.
Yeah, we're planning. So we have an offsite cold box,
Nice.
and we're basically going to get rid of our cold box on site at the brewery and just transfer stuff down immediately.
Cool.
So that we can, it's important to keep beer cold, but we don't necessarily need it to be in this very valuable 14,
Right.
14 by 20 space.
Right. It costs you 3 times what your cold box space is.
Exactly.
Well, great. Congratulations. That's a huge step.
Yeah, it's exciting. We started shipping. They started fulfilling orders on Monday this week, and so far so good. It's going to be a lot of different challenges, but so far they're all fun different challenges, and it's kind of exciting to go from. We have 14 people on our team at Hopewell. We're working to train their 100 major reps who are going to be in our specific parts of their territory over the next couple of weeks, and it's overwhelming to be meeting so many new people who are on your team to some extent.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. And last but certainly not least, and honestly, if I'm facing north, so he probably should have been first if I was going right to left, but the computer's over on the left. So Bryan Roth. Bryan, how are you doing?
No OSHA violations over here.
Sure, that's what they all say on the
So
podcast.
I'm doing great.
Nice. What's new in your life?
I've got a 7-month-old puppy that my wife and I adopted recently that is keeping us active and on our toes a little bit.
What type of puppy?
So that's been a border collie.
Oh.
There's a litter that was at a local shelter.
Nice.
Very energy
low
for this.
energy, chill dogs.
Unfortunate amount of energies and equally unfortunately smart. So that makes things a little bit more difficult.
Sure,
but cute and adorable all the same.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been good. I've just been working on normal stuff with the Feel Goods Company, which is I work as an analyst for now. Work with a bunch of different beverage brands. Got some new products launching. Actually, just announced today with New Belgium, which is great.
Nice.
Continuing to deliver the news with Good Beer Hunting, which is fun and exciting. Just keeping tabs on everything that's going on in the beer industry and just my regular old kind of analysis and insights on whatever's happening across beer and beyond.
Awesome. And have you had any beers recently or looking forward to having any beers in the near future that you'd like to talk about?
In a few days from when we're talking, I'm actually heading to Florida for 5 days to go watch baseball.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to be watching the final 5 games of the World Baseball Classic, which is like the de facto World Cup for international baseball. So there's probably some Miami Marlins lager in my future.
Nice.
And then just whatever Jay Wakefield Florida Vice and other pastry stouts Florida is going to be throwing my way, I think.
Just all of them, I think. Haterades.
I will have no enamel left on my teeth after this trip. My taste buds will be shot, but it will be worth it, I suppose.
Definitely worth it. Which game are you most excited for?
I am a huge Shohei Ohtani fan.
Who is it?
And while we are still waiting for Japan to officially qualify for the games that I will be there, I feel very good about Japan being in the semifinals. So Shohei Ohtani, a generational talent, arguably the most talented baseball players who ever play the game in the history of the world. And so I'm pumped to see him live.
I go to a White Sox Angels game every year to try to see him and Trout play, and this has been going on for Trout for 4 or 5 years. I've yet to see either of them play. Every game I pick, they're both out. So I saw Shohei Ohtani hit a home run in the World Baseball Classic, and within 24 hours had gained 1.5 million Instagram followers. So
my wife teases me. I watch supercuts of Shohei Ohtani hitting home runs because it's the same way. Like you all.
How drunk are you when you're doing this? Because I've been known to wake up to a YouTube cue saying super cool home runs if I have a couple too many beers.
There's this there's that sound that we all hear when we open a beer, a can or a bottle. That's just there's just something kind of, I don't know, consistent and magical about it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way about the sound of a home run coming off of Shohei Ohtani's bat.
Nice.
There is just a sound that is created that no one else can do that is just incredible. So I can't wait to, with beer in hand, see and hear that for the first time live.
Awesome. Jonathan, I forgot to ask you, how many digits of pi do you think you can recite?
I believe I have 12.
That's a pretty big number. That's all. I think that's all
A
of
lot
them.
more than me. 0.
No. And Bryan, what about you? How many do you think you got?
Are we counting the first one before we get to decimals?
Is that what you were counting?
11 then for me.
Okay, so he was. Yeah, we're counting the first one. Then we gotta get these numbers juiced. So yeah, count the 3.
Right. I'm gonna say prove it because I can't do that many. So I'm gonna pass. I can do 5. I think. So
I can't. I think I can do 3. Yeah, I think I can probably do 5 if we're not counting the point. That's not so. But
That's not a digit.
It's a whole placeholder. But I've had a beer recently that I'm gonna talk about before we get into your. Just run it in your brain, see if you can.
I already got it.
You got it.
Yeah, I've had it since.
Search Q up pie and see. Okay. But I had a beer. We did a collaboration with Goldfinger recently, where I convinced Tom to let me come into his brewery first. That was the first thing I had to convince him to do, covered in Brettanomyces. And then I convinced him to let me take half the wort from one of his batches of lager he brews, because they step mash and then decoct, and we made a Roth beer, which is like a red beer, Bavarian red lager that was double decocted. And we took half of it in a tote that actually I got from you, Jonathan. Took half of it back to our brewery. They fermented half with their lager yeast. We fermented half with our Saison yeast. And then we further split that and bottled half of it just straight up without any additional yeast, and half with our blend of Brettanomyces. And then we released all 3 at Goldfinger this weekend. So they had both of the base versions on draft, and then they had bottles available for people to come and grab. And it was really fun drinking them next to each other. Clearly they were like siblings of some sort, but there were like pretty significant differences. Ours finished at 0 Plato, so it was quite a bit stronger. And there was a lot more ester and phenolic going on.
So were you getting heat from it?
No, it was still only 6.5% alcohol,
Okay.
which is the second strongest beer we've ever made. But no, just more like the ester profile was really like, and with the decoction and the sour goo they used to adjust pH, there was this crazy like dime store gumball thing going on with some pineapple, and then this like star anise thing that I think was happening between the hop character and the phenolics. It was wild. I drank some yesterday too, and I was also getting like al pastor tacos, but that was the last beer I had of the night, so I was like, probably shut it down. But yeah,
That sounds really cool.
their version's called, it's just Roth beer, because they're like a classy brewery, and ours is called Roth Rustical, which means like rustic rot, a rustic red.
It's really fun doing side by sides with the collaboration beers.
Yeah.
We just did. We had both Pivo and we had this inspiration for that from Italy, from Birrificio Italiano and
Tipo, right?
yeah, Tipo pills and Pivo pills, and going back and forth. They are they have the same grain bill. Obviously, they have different water, but the intent was to be the same beer, but of course they're not quite the same. And we were doing, a lot of people at the bar were making comments of like which one they liked the most, and it seemed like the Firestone Walker was often the winner.
I'm an avowed Pivo over Tipo guy. It might just be we're getting it a little older here or something, but Pivo is, or just that Pivo is one of like my desert island beers. Basically, it's just so exactly what I want.
Yeah, Pivo is perfect.
Yeah.
It's tough to...
The Tipo is drier.
Is it?
Yeah, it has a noticeably drier quality to it, and it's a very, very good beer. It's very well made. We got it pretty fresh, but there's something about when you're looking for like all these different points, and it's just hard to beat that Firestone Walker.
Right, and there's got to be something to it. Was purposely built for American palates, where the European, the Italian version wasn't necessarily built for like I'm not that he did this, but I'm sure like I'm exactly the middle of the bullseye of who he's trying to get to drink Pivo. So, or who they are trying to get to drink Pivo, and they nailed it. So, not that Tipo is in any way a bad beer, but I just prefer the Pivo.
Yeah, we still have both of them on tap, and people are going back and forth. I will say that the Tipo has a exceptionally beautiful glass.
And that goes a long way.
That Italian design thing.
Right? Do they like that? Well, I think I've only got 5 digits of pi that I could knock out. So, Jonathan,
Right. Well,
Serge, pull it
check
up.
me, Serge.
You got you.
So it's 3.24. No, I'm just
Nailed it.
I think it's 3.14159265358, and then I don't remember what's after the 8.
You got to keep guessing, dude.
8.5? Nah, I don't know.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. Serge said he has all of them, so he still
had
won't do it. I'll
They
do it
had like
live.
100 digits of pi on a wall in my math class, and that's what I remember from that.
Nice. Let's take a quick break, refresh some beers, and we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about Lost Abbey.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Beer Temple Podcast. Got a good old-fashioned roundtable with some heavy hitters. Michael Roper of Hopleaf, Jonathan Fritz of Hopewell, and Bryan Roth of many things, including good beer hunting. To name one, because I can't name your whole resume. And we are going to start talking about Lost Abbey's downscaling and some updates that they came out with recently, because I think we've talked about it before on the show. And just real quick, I'm going to dash off some bullet points that they said about what they're going to do with their space and their brands and stuff. Lost Abbey and Port will become separate business entities. Lost Abbey will shut down its San Marco taproom on May 1st and vacate the space at the end of the month after 17 years in that space. Lost Abbey will look to form an alternating proprietorship or contract brewing relationship in Southern California. Lost Abbey's lease expires on May 31st. Pizza Port Brewing will take over the San Marcos brewing facility's 20,000 square feet, which is not confusing at all that Pizza Port is taking over Port's and Lost Abbey's space. Operation and 25,000 barrels of production capacity. In addition to the brewing assets, Pizza Port will take over the intellectual property of Port Brewing and the THC brand, which is the hop concept, which is one of Lost Abbey's brands. And then after the split, Lost Abbey's 3 satellite tap rooms, the intellectual property of Lost Abbey, Tiny Bubbles, and Charisma, Hard Tea, and any other ongoing business concerns attached to the hospitality business will be folded into a new business entity. So those are the bullet points that they put out on their growing down. And I kind of love what they're doing and really respect it. I know, Michael, you've talked to Mr. Arthur.
Tommy and I are pretty good friends, and I visited them quite some time ago. Their original brewery tap room was extremely primitive and also highly limited by local codes. It was a problematic space because they couldn't, like, they had no stools. They would not. The community would let, it was strictly a tasting room. You could walk in there. You could have plastic cups of samples of their beer, but they didn't want, the local community didn't want a bar in their neighborhood. So they were always hamstrung by that, which is why they opened some satellite tap rooms before a lot of other people did, because their brewery one was pretty awful to visit. I mean, the beer was great, but I don't like drinking in plastic cups, and I don't like standing up the whole time I'm there. But I think that, Tommy is very committed to styles of beer that are not trendy.
What a weird thing to do.
I mean, he really loves those, Belgian style beers and saisons and things like that. And he was still selling his beers in like 750 corked and caged bottles and stuff, which are really
500's the cool format.
they're really hard to sell.
They
But
are indeed.
I think that there's a niche market for him.
Right.
If he downsizes, it can work for him.
Yeah.
And I also think the pizza port thing was a whole other concept that he wasn't that passionate about.
I mean, pretty obviously, given the way that they're going about this, right? He's very obviously protecting Lost Abbey, and it's like this other stuff has value to it, so buy it from us, but I want to keep this project going, which...
Right, and I think it will remain small. It's very hard to scale up what he's doing.
Right.
And if you can't scale up, scale down,
Right.
And I actually think this is the only way that ensures that Lost Abbey has a future.
Right.
Otherwise, I kind of think that they would have just died.
Sure.
And I don't think that Tommy's been around a long time, and I don't think he needs to be a growing entity. I think he just wants to do what he wants to do and find the right size. He's going to right size the company. He probably is not going to have a ton of employees, but I think he's looking to ride this thing out as a small niche brewery that makes beers that he's really proud of. And I don't know if you've drank recently any of those classic beers that he's been making for years. They're really good.
They're really good.
I mean, like, he can be very proud of what he does, but I think it's a concept that can't survive as a large
Right.
brewery. So I think he'll be a little niche brewery. I look forward to going out there and visiting him and seeing what he's doing now.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we will see his beer in our market anymore.
Well, yeah, I think that in this article, one thing they said is that they'll probably make around 2,500 barrels of beer annually, which is not nothing. That's a decent amount of beer, but it's a far cry from the 25,000 they built that brewery to make originally. And it says they have 3 markets of distribution footprint right now in California, Arizona, and Colorado is what they're going to focus on, which makes sense, right?
Yep.
And I think they're kind of like I don't know what the right word is, but got swept up in the frenzy of 2014 craft beer on, right? Where it's like, well, it's just open field running and we're going to be able to sell a little bit in all 50 states. And then it's not the way that we thought, or we probably most people in the brewing industry thought that when you hit this, this larger scale of more awareness of beer and more volume being sold, that it was going to look exactly like what it looked like then, just more of it, right? That's not what happened, right? So the idea of being an inch deep and a mile wide just doesn't really exist the same way it did in 2014. As people could look to like Jolly Pumpkin doing it successfully, and maybe a couple others through 12% or Shelton or something like that were doing that, but it just doesn't happen anymore. Really, I
suppose that maybe they thought the port brewing company would be more scalable because they were brewing like hoppy IPAs and stuff. And we sold their beer on draft occasionally. Yeah. And it was good, but it never took hold. Nobody cared about it.
Sure.
So
I think there's like a lot of brand confusion there. Ironically, with who they're selling a lot of that equipment to, where like even I, as someone who's pretty tuned in, was sometimes confused as to which brewery was making which beer. What do you, Jonathan, as a brewery owner, think about this idea of right sizing or downsizing or whatever we want to call this?
I mean, I think part of the reason that we're changing our business is because the business would work better a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. So I think you always need to be thinking about, do you get bigger or smaller? We think about that all the time. We sold more beer last year than we ever have, but everything's more expensive now. So
right.
We also considered becoming a smaller company rather than becoming a bigger company. I actually was going to turn this around on you. Everything that Michael was saying sounded like there was a lot of subtext for what you're doing. I think you probably have some good insight. I was going to ask you, knowing what you know from Lost Abbey, and they built a 20,000 barrel brewery, which is huge. Yeah. I mean, that's a crazy leap. That's really, really big.
Right.
You are significantly smaller than that, but growing.
Sure.
So moving in a different direction.
Right.
Does that inform what your goals are on growth? And I know, you're looking around for space or.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily what's happening to them is informing what I'm looking at as growth, but what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years in general, right? When I wrote the original, I've written probably 5 business plans that I've done nothing with because it hasn't been the right time to raise money for a big move. And I don't even know when that time's going to be. It's not looking like right now, to be honest. But originally I was like, well, we'll probably get to like 2,000 barrels at some point. And now like the business plans I'm writing are like, if we can do like 1,000 or 500 to 1,000, depending on the split of it, like that would be we could make a successful business out of that. Yeah. But it was always existed as a brewery that was meant to be as big as it should be, and I never wanted to push the brewery, which you have to do a little bit of, right? You have to believe in it. You have to go out and sell in places that you don't think you're going to really get a sale. And honestly, my intention was never just to make Saison. It still isn't necessarily. If we had our own space, we would make other things, but the focus will always be that. So, I mean, does this change my plans of scale? Not really. It's more like locally to Chicago what I think we could do and what we can do now. Like we make like maybe 100 barrels of beer a year. I have to actually do the math, but we make a very small amount of beer, and it's just me. So again, when we look at scaling in a small scale like that, like I can't make twice the amount of beer because it's just me, and twice the amount of beer doesn't pay for another person. So it's still like we have to stay at this level and keep it sustainable, and then it has to jump a couple of orders of magnitude of scale.
And your first hire is the most you're ever going to grow.
Right.
In one
100,
day. 100% growth of employees.
Right.
Like you're never going to go from 3 to 15.
Right. I mean, maybe when you open a tap room, you will, but it will be a different type of like.
Right.
dollars per person kind of calculus. So, or per employee. So I mean, like, but mostly it's just been the nature of the Chicago beer market that I've seen, and really putting and believing in, for better or worse, centering my belief in the beers we're making, and figuring out what size the brewery needs to be to do that. And if that means I have to do something else for a little bit of supplemental income to make my personal life work, that's an option. Or if it means that we only make 500 barrels of beer or whatever it is. But I don't think I could make a brewery that functioned or worked without making things that I believe in every single drop of the liquid. So,
oh yeah, that makes sense.
And like,
well, and the other side of the story is the pizza port side of the story.
Right.
There's, going to be a lot of breweries available for other people to move into,
right.
And like you said, it is, even if you are passionate, it's smart to be like thinking about what's sustainable. That's
right. And from the beginning of was as a business, part of my idea was that the creativity doesn't stop just at the beers that we make. It also it works for how we operate the business, right? And how we find ways to make revenue and how we go to the market.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, the 4 tanks that we just ordered, that's all just THC seltzer from now on.
And that's awesome. That rocks.
No, actually, we've talked about that. Going to Minnesota. I don't know if any of you have been to Minnesota recently. Weed's just straight up legal there. Like the hotel mini bar had THC sleep gummy just in the mini bar. Like every liquor store, every brewery is just producing with THC. With no regulation, and it's untaxed, evidently. So we came back.
That doesn't sound right at all.
There's done by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The legislators actually didn't realize that they had legalized, I forget which specific strain of Delta, but it was an accident.
And so now it's
Amazing.
never going away because every store in the state, it seems like, has it. But when we were looking, so do we go after that? Like everybody's being really successful, and I have no passion for THC beverage at all. And so me and Samantha and Steven, my partners at Hopewell, were like, it's a good thought to make a lot of money on something like that, but I don't actually think I'd be good at it if I don't care about it at all.
Right. I also think that we're at a time right now where there's so many breweries and so many beverage producers that there isn't as much just if we do that, we'll make money type of things, right? Like you can't just be like, well, if we make a hazy beer, we'll make money doing it. It's like, well, there's a bazillion of them. Or if we make the THC liquid, it's no guarantee that you'll
that's so true.
Start making a bunch of profit because you made a thing that was trending on some Forbes magazine article.
It's playing the lottery. Maybe you will, but you do need to be passionate about what you're making because we're a craft beverage. So there can be craft THC beverage, I'm sure, but it's not what I'm passionate about. And honestly, if you're not passionate about it, someone's going to make it cheaper than you.
Right. Or make it more interesting or have more energy behind the marketing of it. There's just, it's hard to compete.
Some behemoth could come in and, out-compete all of us on crummy craft beverage.
Bryan, as someone who's really tuned in to sales numbers and the analytics of how you should actually be running your brewery as a business, what do you think about this approach?
Yeah, I appreciate Tommy's pragmatic approach and how honest and candid he was when he started talking about this decision toward the end of last year. Because, California isn't very different than most other states in the country, where whether you're looking at chain retail sales or just general a beer that is made and shipped to California from anywhere in the U.S., it's all negative. Beer as a whole was down about 5% last year in chain retail. Craft was twice that, negative 10%. The barrels, so the Beer Institute tracks barrels made and shipped domestically. California was negative 4% last year. This compared to 21. They're coming off the pandemic highs, but even still, I think, Mike, what you were just talking about in terms of the competition across anything is what really matters here. And that shows in what Tommy had done with the overall business too. Like it wasn't just beer, it was hard tea. Tiny Bubbles was like a fruit flavored sour wheat ale focused. So it's not just, so he's got the IPAs covered. He's got, the specialty bottles with Lost Abbey. There's Tiny Bubbles for fruit forward beers. There's hard tea, because it's like, the way I've been describing it is, if you think about a beer maker in like an average scenario, there's a narrow band if you think about direct competition in beer, right? It's like the breweries near you, or maybe it's larger breweries that are trying to encroach in that city or state. But like, if you think about that from the perspective of a consumer, like, then what is narrow all of a sudden becomes like 5 lanes wide, because they're not just drinking beer, right? They're drinking beer or seltzer or spirit-based seltzer, or maybe a flavored wine or a regular liquor. Like their width of brands and kinds of things that they drink has widened like exponentially just by virtue of like what's in the market. So like with Lost Abbey, they hit their high of about 15,000 barrels of production. I think it was 2015. And the goal, the way that Tommy talked about it was, and it's weird too, because if you think about that in context of San Diego, like they were sending stuff. I'm in North Carolina. Like we got Lost Abbey beers here in North Carolina, but California is such a beer rich state. If you're making 15,000 barrels, like, okay, that makes sense that maybe you're going to start sending things a little bit more wider, just because there's whatever, like 300 breweries in San Diego County alone. So, the plan, the way that he's described it, is they want to go from that 15,000 barrel-ish high from 8 years ago now to try to, across all of the brands, get to about 8,000 barrels. And then like Lost Abbey would be roughly 2,000 barrels of that.
Yeah, I think that 2,500-ish.
Yeah, so, given the size and the space, and even for something like Lost Abbey specifically, like just that brand of beer, California pandemic era laws, you can go to the Lost Abbey website right now, and if you live in California, get their beer shipped directly to your doorstep. So like that's never going to be a huge moneymaker, but that is another avenue that they can use where they're keeping things in-house and it's cost to ship stuff, but you can factor that into price. Like there's ways to make this work as a brewery and breweries that have been around for a while. And it's not so much focused on that constant bottom line. Like I think Tommy spoke about it very eloquently, talking about like, this isn't about perpetual growth. This is simply about finding, what's going to work. Like you all were talking about, like what's the amount that we just need to make just to make it work. And if that means that he gets to keep his 30-ish employees, from now in the years to come, like that's great.
Right. And this is not necessarily beer specific, but the landscape of financing is completely different than it was 5 years ago. Like money was essentially free for a lot of this growth in the craft beer industry, right? And that's just not the case anymore. Like a lot of SBA loans were given out at like 2%, 2.5%, 1.5% for a while. It was crazy how easy it was, or not easy to get the loans, but how little impact there was on those loans. And when you think, are we going to try to grow and get a huge infusion of either capital or take on a loan, or are we going to try to figure out how to make the resources we have continue to make us money currently? Like it makes your decision a little bit different, and the calculus of it changes.
I mean, the bank that I use has, the bankers have said, we're not backing any more breweries.
Yeah, fair enough. It makes a lot of sense.
There's this scenario that like it's wild to think 10 years ago when people who wanted to open a brewery were seeking funding, and whether it's a bank or an investor, like there was cultural cachet of thinking totally. I can go into this tap room and I'll sit down at my usual spot at the bar and have a beer because like this is a business that I invested in, like they know me. And now that conversation is, tell me where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years, because I need to know when my investment is being paid back. No excuses.
No, totally. And honestly, it probably should be how it should be, but it was great for a while, party.
We just had our first fake investor come into the tap room.
Oh, for real?
With our bartender, our taproom manager, Brandon, has been with us since day one. And some 25-year-old guy walked in with a group of 30 and said, "Oh, I'm an investor here." And we just couldn't figure out what he was trying to get. Probably free beer or something. But we're like, "No, you're not."
I know all of them.
Yeah, no, it's all like family, friends, investors.
Right. You couldn't drink when this place opened.
Yeah. Listen here,
Much less,
son.
yeah, much less invest money in it. Well, I'm psyched. I like what they're doing. I'm glad that Pizza Port will continue to exist, or Lost Dad will continue to exist, because the other option is they don't, right? They don't do this and they just call it a day, and then that beer doesn't get to be in the world. And it's, I think, especially for
no one would buy that brand.
Right.
That
Sure.
it would just vanish.
Right. And but I'm glad I also am glad that there's someone like that who has a pretty, pronounced persona in national craft beer, who's just like, well, I'd rather make less beer and make the beers that I really believe in and figure out how to make these assets work. I really hope it works, and I hope they lay a model for other breweries that are in a similar situation. That conversation can kind of bring us into either of the two other articles we talked about. Would we rather talk about what's Goose Island's or what ABI is doing right now, or what Amazon was thinking about doing? And
Your choice.
You're driving the bus.
let's talk about Goose for a little bit.
I do prefer to call
corporate
ABI
conglomerate
Goose.
would you like?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think of it all as Goose, actually.
Yeah.
That was a Freudian little slip. So they've been doing a lot, but not in a positive direction for what we want to see happen with craft beer. So they closed down Platform Beer Company, which they'd only bought about 4 years ago. And they're basically only going to brew a couple of the brands, like 3 or 4 IPA brands. They laid off all those people. They've been laying off people at every single one of their craft breweries. That they laid off people at Blue Point, Devil's Backbone, Golden Road, Carbach, Wicked Weed. At least those ones we've confirmed. And it seems like pretty much all of the resources that they are stripping from craft beer is going into either Stella or RTD cocktails. There was an article that was on Good Beer Hunting that I thought was pretty great. And this just seems like kind of like a Rolling Rock all over again for Platform Brewing Company or Beer Company. Like they bought this brand. They were like, oh, nothing's going to change. And then within 4 years, they're like, well, we're keeping some of the brands, but we cease the operations of this. And I don't know. What do you guys think about this? How do we feel about this? Is it inevitable? Is it just what they do? Are we upset, or are we just jaded about it?
I mean, it's definitely sad. Anytime 30 people at a local company in Chicago are losing their job, that's really sad, and especially because Goose Island. We actually just did a collaboration with them as well in their pilot. Made a Lupo lager in their pilot system.
Oh, that's awesome.
2-barrel, but they hold so much of Chicago's beer production knowledge. Between them and Rev and a little bit of Lagunitas, but more so for if we need to ask a question that we don't know the answer to. We go to Goose still, and so it's sad when the business isn't working out in a way to keep everybody on.
They not only got rid of those breweries' employees, but they fired or let go some people that were just in internal kind of communication roles and branding roles at ABI's high end or whatever they're calling it now.
That's right. Yeah. And the other side of that story that I thought was really interesting, and we can come back to the question you actually asked me, but
listen, that's not what the show is about.
Bear Hug was showing like 3x growth.
Three-digit percentage growth.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting because when Goose was first bought, I feel like the narrative, from people sitting at this same table as us, 8 years ago or whatever, were saying they bought Goose because Anheuser-Busch can't produce new brands. So I thought it was interesting that like they bought it for Goose IPA because otherwise they would just make Budweiser IPA. And so this is a totally new brand that's growing really well. I think it's interesting that they've built the different arms of their company into a place that can still be creative and make new beers. I actually had one of those beers not too long ago at Rabbit's, which is a great bar.
That's
it's the kind of bar
dangerous
that like that's the good option that you order that or Guinness.
Yeah.
And there's not really any other option.
Well, that bar is as much of an indicator of what's happened to craft beer. Where it used to be, well, that might be for other circumstances, but it used to have a bunch of different local craft beers on tap, and now it just doesn't.
Yeah.
It just has a lot of Goose stuff, to be honest. But to that point, like, well, so Goose IPA fell 19% in volume in 2020, but Beer Hug Family saw triple-digit volume sales over the growth of 2022. And basically the whole thing that's happening right now is that what I think AIB is doing with craft beer, quote unquote, is that craft beer they've figured out, they're not saying this out loud, is that consumers think that craft beer at the grocery store is the stronger beer. And so I buy a 12-pack. I pay a little bit more for it, but it's because it was 7%. And well, that one's 8%. Well, that one's 9% now because craft Beer Hug is a higher ABV beer. So Elysian,
that actually explains a lot.
Well, Elysian, Space Dust declined 6%, but Full Contact Hazy Imperial IPA performed much better. That was only down 4%, I guess. But 10 Barrel also got rid of their flagship Joe IPA and instead is brewing Always Double Down IPA, which debuted in 2021 and saw another triple-digit volume between 21 and 2022.
That's interesting. So you think it's an alcohol thing?
I think it's entirely an alcohol thing. That this is like now their vertical for jamming, for getting people to be like, well, it's a good value because I'm getting 8% alcohol or 9% alcohol.
The golden monkey.
Yeah, the golden monkey effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. This could be completely ill-informed. I'm sure other people have been paying attention to different things than just me being like, looks like people just want to get wasted.
Yeah.
Brian, do you have thoughts on the...
People do like to party.
On me just spouting out numbers and just intuitively making stories up about them?
No, I think so. The stratification of what is like an increasingly seems like a binary choice of either you're drinking a non-alcoholic beer or something that's like 9% is like sort of true. Those are certainly the spaces where there's been the most activity and growth. And the thing that I think really matters when we talk about AB when it comes to their like craft subsidiaries is the ease of which R&D can exist for them simply because their distribution network gives them a power play to sell a whole bunch of whatever it is that may work. So like if you look at the brands that shuffle in and out of, Goose is a great example. Their portfolio over the last 6 years, it's basically just trading volume where, their Next Coast IPA was big for a couple of years and then that got discontinued in favor of the Beer Hug. Or with Wicked Weed, so this is an example here in North Carolina where, Wicked Weed has their flagship IPA.
Pernicious, right?
Pernicious, yep. But it's their... they have a Freak of Nature double IPA, which is far smaller in volume, but has gotten a lot more attention. They've basically discontinued at the time of when they were acquired. They were doing a like session IPA called Napoleon, I believe. But it's just like I could do examples ad nauseum, right, where the idea is that because it's easy, because of the distribution network, the placements that they have, the shuffling of these things can just keep on working until they find something that sticks. It's the same thing. We may have seen something similar with the Bud Light Seltzer shenanigans of the last couple of weeks, where they're relaunching for literally the third year in a row a new marketing campaign to tell people that there's no Bud Light, there's no beer in Bud Light Seltzer. Like they've literally been doing this for 3 years straight.
Amazing.
But like the whole reason that Bud Light Seltzer can tread water is because they've created like 80 different SKUs over the course of 3 years.
Play out of our old book, the craft beer.
Sounds like our COVID year.
They're cheating off of us.
Last year, the only reason that Bud Light Seltzer was as didn't fail more, I should say, is because they introduced Bud Light Seltzer Hard Soda, which last year accounted for 30% of their chain retail sales. And so with their craft players, it's really just kind of like zoning in on, craft itself nationally is having a harder time. So if you look at the markets and you look what they're trying to push, it's pick one brand. If it's going to be huge regionally or nationally, that's the thing that they want. And in a way, it's kind of like everything else becomes white noise.
Well, for me, there's a very telling quote in this Good Beer Hunting article from Andy Thomas, who's the president of ABI's High End, which includes all their craft breweries, Michelob Ultra's pure line of organic beers, and Stella and Estrella Jalisco. But it says, winning in craft remains a key pillar of our strategy to lead and develop the premium segment. But winning means something different in today's market than it did a few years ago. So to me, being cynical about it, that means that, well, all we have to do is clog up all of the upward mobility for the independent people and control the distribution of craft beer and the channels through which we distribute beer and the grocery stores and the sets. And then, because they can't get in there and change them, we'll put whatever we need to do to make money in it, which is my cynical take on that. But
the one thing which I will say, which is sort of counter to that, is that they've been failing at that for years. Like, they have the ability to put these beers on shelves, but the only reason that their sales haven't declined more is because they've been shuffling things in out, because they can keep, front of mind with distributors, because they have new products that are launching on a regular basis.
Well, they spent $750 million acquiring and investing in craft brands within a couple, 4 years. So
it was just 3 years ago.
There's someone there who's got to be like, no, this will work.
It was 3 years ago. They called their craft brands the growth engine of the company.
Right. Yeah.
And so, it's like it's them realizing time has changed, and certainly RTDs, canned cocktails are showing a lot of growth and get a lot of hot attention right now. Both Cutwater and Neutral performed way better than a bunch of their craft beer brands.
Right. Well, Cutwater itself, according to this article, made more money than any other single craft beer brands.
It made, I believe it was $30 million more than the closest craft beer brand, which was Elysian.
Yeah, it was like 120 or 140 something $million.
Yeah.
I think the problem is for Budweiser, the same with Miller as well, and Coors, is that their, macro beers are, they have a ball and chain around them that they can't raise prices. Those beers have to be cheap. Mm. So the one thing that, the craft beer brands that they purchase, they're able to charge more money for. They just can't make any money at the, selling. You got to sell an awful lot of Bud Light to make any money,
right?
Because their audience for those beers is very price constrained. I mean, they can't raise prices very much, whereas they can charge more for Goose Island IPA and get away with it. Maybe not as much as a local legitimate craft beer can, but still, I think that Bud Light, Miller Lite, Budweiser, High Life, they got to be cheap,
right? And that's their main appeal, right? You can get a lot of them for almost no money, and they taste basically the same. Some are better than others. Some are more. You personally you like some more than others, but they're the same. Like, they're commodities, and they're intended to be commodities.
And talking about them, pushing the small guys out of the sets or not giving them an opportunity to join, I don't really think that'd be a problem unless 80% of the grocery in the U.S. just changed to one buying desk. So I think we'll be fine as long as Kroger and Super Value don't merge.
Well, do you guys sell much beer at grocery?
No.
And if any of this is something you don't want to
our
give away,
biggest chain is Amazon. We sell the Whole Foods.
That's interesting.
So that's our biggest chain by far, and then a local chain, Foxtrot, We sell a very small amount of beer at Jewel currently. You know, obviously our opportunity will change with how we're switching distribution. We basically sold it to 5 stores, did really well in those 5 stores, but they expanded our sets to 17 stores, and with 2 trucks and, you know, 2 sales reps in Chicago, we just couldn't really service Jewel in a way that, you know, we probably could have sold more beer there if we were in their store every week, and we just were not.
Well, I'm obviously so small that I can barely sell beer at craft beer liquor stores. But when you guys go and try to sell beer to those places, do you feel pressure from places like Goose Island, or like do you think you're in competition with Beer Hug, or is it something else that?
No, we're a local option in targeted stores. You know, like it's.
And do you think consumers go in there and they view you differently as like, oh, this one is actually from around here and it's not the same as this commodity craft beer? Or do you think they're going in there and craft beer hug is $8.99 for a 4-pack of whatever it is?
I guess I don't know enough about how people shop in grocery. I do know every time I am trying to shop at grocery, I find my like 2 SKUs at my local store that I'm like, okay, well, this one I know I'll like. I'm having a bonfire tonight, and I'm only making 1 stop. Right. You know, so like I do appreciate there being a good option, and so I think that there's probably half of a percent of people are like me or you or any of us, who will keep those small parts of the set moving. I think most people who are shopping for craft beer probably don't differentiate between Anheuser products and local craft. I was just in California, in the Yucca Valley. I don't know how to say it. We were in solitude, so we not hearing from people how to say it. But the beer out there was abysmal. It was really, really bad. There was one really good wine shop called, I think it was Wine and Rock Shop. So I bought some
gems.
Bought some power crystals. And a nice bottle of wine, but we really wanted
Did you put them in the wine?
No, I put them in my gym bag.
Oh, yeah. You need that.
But bought a really nice bottle of wine, because wine's great in California. They did not have a good beer section. It was all, out of code by like 4 months. And then tried to go to the grocery store and ended up with Elysian, and I was thankful to have that.
Sure.
So, there's moments where I'll buy any of that stuff.
Well, Bryan, what you know much better than I quote I make up a number every week when we talk about this. What percentage of beer is bought at grocery stores, like in America? Like a pretty high percentage, correct?
Yeah, I could if you gave me the time, I could actually tell you the
Just give us a window.
The general idea is that traditionally, America's very much an at-home drinking culture. About 80% of volume is bought off-premise, so at grocery store, convenience store, whatever it may be, and then it's like dollars because it's more on-premise. It splits pretty evenly between on and off-premise. But the biggest difference from the pandemic is that where that number usually hovered, say, between like 76 to 80%, it got kicked up a few more percentage points. So like, I don't know what it is right now, but, so 2021, we're talking, it might've been like 82, 83% of all alcohol volume. And so, this idea of drinking at home is baked into the way that we already purchase alcohol as is already. And so, when we talk about AB specifically, that's why like their distribution might really matter, just because this is something that Americans have always done, and also just started to increase doing that as well. Not to mention whatever drizzly Uber Eats delivery options we may have as well.
Well, that might be a good transition into another topic we were going to talk about, which is some leaked documents from Amazon about them wanting to, I believe it was change or modernize the 3-tier system, which was basically them wanting to sell booze directly to people through Amazon. And it was an internal memo that they claim was never implemented and is not really important and blah, blah, blah. It has nothing to do with their strategy anymore. but it was kind of shocking, not shocking, but terrifying to see that one of the largest corporations in the country and world, the biggest retailer, one of the biggest retailers in the world, was targeting changing state by state liquor laws to have a better access to sending you booze and cutting out they were trying to cut out both distributors and retail. Not entirely, but that was their play. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about this? Is this surprising at all? Is it? Would you welcome this? Like, what's the general feeling about what Amazon's trying to do, or what they were trying to do in 2021, but apparently not anymore?
I mean, I don't welcome any expansion of Amazon into any new field. I mean, you remember, in the beginning, Amazon was a bookseller.
Right.
And look what they did to the, bookstore industry. They basically
Thriving.
annihilated it.
Yeah.
and as they moved into different products, everything they moved into, they left a wake behind them of destruction because they're so big, so well-funded, so organized that, it's almost impossible to compete with them. And I think that should they enter the market of selling, beer, wine, spirits to their customers, the neighborhood bottle shop might be very negatively impacted.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that the history. Look at the history of the company. The power that they have over the marketplace, and also what will happen to the availability of other products they choose not to carry will probably just vanish from the marketplace. Like for us, we like to carry a lot of obscure Belgian beers. If Amazon comes in the market, will those beers still be available? I don't think so, because they will dominate so entirely that I think that if you get Amazon to carry your product, you'll survive, and if you don't, you won't.
If Amazon came to you at Hopewell and wanted you to sell beer on Amazon, what would you think about that?
I mean, they got a retail license in Naperville, I think like 5 years ago in Amazon, which means that they could do, same way Beer Temple can deliver beer.
Sure.
They getting a retail license was the first thing that kind of scared me. I mean, our beer doesn't belong on Amazon.
They've already got Whole Foods.
And I think that's why I mean, Bryan probably knows better than me, but I think that's arguably why they bought Whole Foods, was for the, direct to consumer. But I think, no, we wouldn't sell our beer on Amazon. We don't really
Mark
belong
it down
in
now.
Walmart. We don't belong in. Yeah, we will never ever sell our. What was it that Tony said?
You hate Daddy Bezos?
Yeah, we don't. I mean, our company, we don't buy anything from Amazon as like a rule. We same with Uline or any of those. So I think it would be pretty upsetting to everyone that works at Hopewell and wants to work at a place that's small and local. If we were we got 8 pallets of Little Buddy going to the Amazon warehouse. I don't know. I mean,
cheaper shipping.
It's the onset of Amazon scares me, and I think we want to learn how to stay relevant with direct to consumer delivery. I mean, it's not something that we're good at right now, outside of probably Whole Foods. So I guess we do sort of sell to Amazon, but it scares me because it's not something that we're good at right now. I don't think it's something that small producers will or should be good at.
Right.
and even though we're growing, we're still very much a small producer.
Right. I wasn't here for the last time we did a roundtable. There was a discussion about the ILCC or the Brewers Guild. ICBGBs, where the beer talking heads started. But about the direct to consumer shipping, and I talked to Chris about it later, and I was like, yeah, we'll never be able to deliver the service that most a place like Foxtrot or Drizzly or something like that or GoPuff delivers, because I'm never bringing you beer in an hour, no matter how.
Well, do you remember at the beginning of the pandemic doing direct to consumer shipping? We were as well positioned as anyone because we were running 2 truck routes in the city every day.
Yeah,
we had people on staff. We were self-distributed, so we were used to taking orders. We created all new SKUs in our database for 4-packs, for single unit SKUs that people could order from us on, Shopify or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
We were awful at it. I mean, it was the best that we could offer was next day delivery after 10 p.m. because I was staying up until midnight to punch all the orders for the next day. And
yeah, I mean, when I did it, and it grew into 20% of my business revenue wise, maybe 25, but it was just me driving around in my station wagon once or twice a month and just being like, hey, you're going to get it on this Friday. Order it whenever you can.
You should have just loaded up the back of the truck and do the old spiteful thing where it's just drive around until you have an order.
That's a good. I should have done that. Just texting people that they gave me their phone number, and I'm just texting them hey, do you want beer? I'm in your neighborhood. Who is this?
I'm out front right now.
Yeah, I'm outside.
Do you love Saison like I love Saison?
All the people who ordered from us definitely did, because it was not easy to get it from us. But also, everyone was home. There's no I can't imagine if I tried to do that now, and people would be like, "Well, I'm actually at the office right now," and I'm like, "Well, I drove 45 minutes to your house, and it's not working out for me."
I mean, everyone was home, and no one was checking up on shit.
Right.
It's not legal to do anymore, so I'll tell you, we didn't card anyone.
Right. Well, I tried to, but then it was at certain points, if you already ordered from us, sorry, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's another thing, the system that Amazon uses to deliver stuff cannot work for alcohol, at least the way the laws are currently set up, because you have to check someone's ID at the door.
It works worse when you huck a case of beer over someone's fence.
I mean, cans might be able to survive, right?
Yeah.
Bryan, have you thought about this at all, and how it would affect kind of the things that you're tuned into and the sales data and things like that, or anything else you want to talk about? I don't want to pigeonhole you.
Well, the thing that I think I don't expect Vice or Motherboard to have memories that go back to trade publications from years prior. But in 2019, Amazon hired its first lobbyist specifically for alcohol policy.
I have a friend at Amazon that sent me that job listing, and I'm like, I don't think this is for me.
I don't know how many. At one point, there were 4 Amazon full-time lobbyists who were registered with an organization that focused on alcohol policy. I don't know how many are currently at the company.
SRI or IAS. It's noted in the RSI that does a lot of alcohol
it's
policy.
an NCL. Anyway.
Okay. Doesn't matter.
The idea being is that these there was a goal from the company before this document was drafted to change policy. There was one today. There will be one tomorrow, and it will be policy effort going forward. The problem that you're all mentioning here is one that poses a curious risk, because there's been a lot of attention over the last year and a half, both from a collection of academic researchers who openly admit that they have policy goals in mind, as well as state legislators from across the country that are worried about delivery systems which are improperly delivering alcohol to minors. There was just a report that I think focused on the state of Massachusetts, where it was, I can't remember the percentage, but it was more than 50% of deliveries under this guidance of it was someone who's clearly underage for this study or whatever it was, received alcohol despite it being obviously a 21 and over thing.
So this is like a sting operation.
Yeah, and this is one of those kind of quirky things that it's easy for politicians to wrap their heads around because it is simple bullet points. If you walked into a state legislator's office and told them, look, there is a business that right now is delivering alcohol to minors who are not being carded, and we know about it.
Like, talk about Hopewell?
Everybody was clearly over 35.
Sorry to bleep that out.
It's like, I bring this up because that's happening now. And these are like, that's the level of simplicity of when things are brought to people who write law, of which they need to understand, because that's when things start getting worked into like discussions in state houses. So with Amazon, the other side is like they have bottomless pockets, and they've made it clear in this document from a couple of years ago that they wanted to work with some of the largest grocery chains in the country, Walmart and Kroger, as well, to make this happen.
It was, when I was reading that, it says, we were, by aligning with large retailers like Walmart and Kroger, the company planned for a higher likelihood of success. And it's like, that's terrifying. It's just disgusting, gross. But I mean, I think also that there's something to the fact that this was no longer a living document, and they seem to have not made too much progress on the success of it in the last couple of years, even as big as they are and as motivated as they are. I think speaks volumes. Like, there's a lot of money to be made in their distribution network being the last mile of alcohol delivery, and the fact that they've kind of seemed to have been like, well, this is taking a lot of resources that we might not have, is I don't know, heartening for us little guys. We won one through like unnecessarily complicated.
Well, I think it's a
laws.
different thing to be fighting against like mom and pop bookshops and like anything else than it is to be fighting against these like massive distribution companies, which are
there's
printing money every day.
Yes.
There's a quote in this from a guy named his name's Craig Purser, the CEO of NBWA, which is the National Beers Wholesaler Association, which is like essentially a lobbying group, right? The quote is, "It is concerning that a massive corporation is reportedly hiding behind a special interest shadow group to advance ways to circumvent a safe and effective alcohol ecosystem, including the local retailers that work every day to provide products in the competitive way to American consumers." And it's like, well, that's what you are? Isn't that exactly what you are?
To be fair, that's literally what NBWA is doing against FMBs like Hard Mountain Dew right now too. Like, they have a lobbying effort against this
because of the Pepsi distributor, right? The blue something. But yeah, it's just like there's just like that's what you are. And like, isn't Reyes one of the largest privately held companies in the country? And aren't you their group that's speaking on their behalf currently? It's just hilarious that the brazenness of that, to be like, most people aren't going to catch that. But yeah, big companies and lobbying groups. No. Sorry, I thought that was a fun aside.
Now, I mean, all this being said, if you were to go down, like walk down the street and ask, do just like a person on the street Q&A, and ask like, would you like Amazon to deliver alcohol to you? Like, would you like your six pack delivered by Amazon? I don't see how you don't come out with most people saying yes. Right.
Well, that's a similar, like, there was a poll recently about like, if brewers could ship directly to your house, would you buy more beer? And people are like, yeah, probably. It's like, yeah, of course. Like, of course you would. But would you actually do it when you realize it's, $15 for the box and $110 to ship it to you? Like, no, you probably won't. But if it's Amazon Prime next day, maybe they would.
Does Amazon have cold storage, you think?
I mean, they got a lot of supply chain for Whole Foods, right? So I bet they have some cold storage.
I bet you Amazon storing beer ambient. That's the single biggest reason not to order beer from Amazon.
Yeah, or just don't support a monster that's eating everything in its path. Speaking of their monster that ate everything in its path.
I love that the hyperbole is all like just accurate.
Speaking of their this is just another aside that was at the end of one of these articles that was more just like funny things that are happening in beer. Bill Gates apparently bought $900 million of Heineken stock recently.
Really?
Yeah. There's no. He hasn't said why or anything. There's a lot of like
loves
Twitter.
DMS.
There's a lot of like Twitter fingers talking about like what he's doing with that. My guess is it's some sort of water play to Africa because there's a million Heineken breweries. But like it's hilarious to be like Bill Gates just bought. There he is. He's Serge is now showing us a video of Bill Gates dabbing.
He is dabbing.
And he is saying that's definitely from right after buying $900 million.
He's dabbing like someone who read about dabbing in a book.
Right. Straight arms. But it also puts that in perspective, right? Like he just buys $900 million of Heineken stock. He basically bought Lagunitas. And
so spent more than ZX spent on all their craft brands.
Right. Right. All the ABI spent on every brand and investment they've done, and it's just like a footnote at the end of one of these articles. So we got to keep our eye on Bill, see what he's doing with that skunked up lager.
Yeah.
Well, I think that sounds good to me about Amazon shipping. Would anyone like to promote anything or say anything that they've got going on that people should come to? No calls to action, but because it does go on the radio. But got anything that people should know about that you're doing? Who wants to start?
I mean, I already mentioned my coming in tomorrow to taste the first Allagash IPA. So see what it's like.
And when will that be on tap for people to have over at the Old Hop Leaf?
5 o'clock.
I'll say Michael was kind enough to bring some of the dark lager, the Hop Leaf dark lager, which the last time I was at your spot, I was just telling you, I drank 3 in a row because it was so good. So
I have at least one every time I'm there, and I'm there a lot.
I won't do a call to action for it, but I can't recommend enough starting your night there, getting an excellent dinner, and then going to the Green Mill for the single most culturally important place in Chicago, I'll say.
Nice. Brian, anything you'd like everyone to know?
If I can, not a call to action, but a shout out perhaps. I recently recorded a really great podcast with Ricky Rivera, who runs No Walk Brew House out of California. Ray's been doing a really great job with kind of building up this brewery. He was just a finalist amongst the Sam Adams Brewing of a Dream competition. Just signed a new beer production deal with, I think, a board game company out in California.
Cool.
Ray has done a really great job kind of raising the profile of Latino brewers and Hispanic brewers, of which he is among, and kind of prioritizing the way that this can be like the next generation and iteration of how people in California know and celebrate beer. So he's doing a really great job, and I appreciate the hustle he's putting out there. Awesome.
So check out that. Where can people find that?
That podcast in which Ray also talks about the SoCal Cervecios. It's a Latino-specific homebrew club, which is the largest in the country and has been celebrated as one of the most important in the world, is at goodbeerhunting.com.
All right. Well, guys, thank you for being on. This has been a pleasure. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted.